Hello, hello. Welcome to a Mental Health Wednesday. This is weird. It's not a Mental Health Monday. So we are here, special edition, special scheduling. And y'all don't know, behind the scenes, we've had a hell of a time making sure that this one happens. So it's I had to reschedule last time. Allison had to reschedule at one point. But we're here, and it's going to be a lovely, wonderful, beautiful conversation. So thank you guys for being here. Thank you guys for already chatting. I see you in the chat already. Hey, bye. Hey, 488. Gypsy ALA17, whatever. Hello. Oh, it's Joyce. Hi, Joyce. Welcome. Happy Wednesday. I hope y'all are doing fantabulous today. We do have a wonderful topic tonight. I'm going to open up this question queue. Y'all know the drill. If you have a question, enter it into that question queue. Make sure to pop it into the chat, and I will get to it with our guest, who is here with us to talk about anxiety, trauma, and sex and intimacy. So a little bit about Allison. Allison is a licensed therapist with a specialty in anxiety, trauma, and sex and intimacy. Her mission is to help anxious, high-achieving women ditch shame, let go of guilt, reclaim their confidence, and learn to build a full life of passion rather than pressure. Allison has had an impressive and varied career working in mental health, psychology, and leadership. She has held positions with the FBI, New York University, Planned Parenthood, New York Presbyterian Hospital, Mount Sinai Hospital, and Rikers Island Correctional. She's currently the owner of a private practice, Mindful Mental Health, and she holds 4 degrees related to mental health and psychology. And also, Allison is an international world traveler and has seen over 25 countries, which is a lot of countries. So I've got some socials for y'all. If y'all want to connect with Allison, feel free to click through on any of those. And Allison, thank you so much for taking the time today and joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Oh, these are not posting to LinkedIn because there's or to YouTube because there's too many. Hold on, YouTube. Hold on. Let me do this in 2 chunks here. We'll send those links and then we'll send these links. How about
That's it. I have too many links, too many networks.
Too many. Look, sometimes it feels that way for sure. So that was a lot of you've done a lot of shit in your life. So can you talk about just your personal journey and what led you to your specialty and to this fabulous career you've had?
Yeah. So, it's funny. I always get where did the origin story start? And, I think anybody who's in mental health, anybody who talks about trauma or anxiety, they typically have had some kind of experience with them personally. So, unlike very similar to most healers out in the world, I struggled with my own mental health issues, particularly with anxiety. And I was a pretty anxious teenager, right? So I got really involved. I'm 42, so I grew up in the 90s, where there really wasn't quite a lot of conversations on anxiety just yet, right? So I became sort of fascinated with the idea of psychology. I started reading all the books I could get my hands on. They didn't particularly help, but it did get that interest going, coupled with the fact that I became marginally obsessed with the show SVU, Law and Order SVU had just come out. And I just loved it. So when I was kind of starting to approach, what do you want to do when you grow up? You got to go off to college and do all the things that was sort of expected of me. I was really fascinated with the idea of becoming someone who gets to work in SVU. And, my mom hated that, right? I would say to people she'd be like, what do your daughter want to do when she grows up? And I'd be like, I want to work with serial killers. I want to work with crime. And she's like, why can't you be a veterinarian? You love cats, So I went to school, and when I went to college in 1999, there really wasn't any programs yet in forensics, even though that was really interesting to me. So I went to NYU, and I studied psychology and mental health. And at the time, I double majored in what was known as women's studies. Now it's more appropriately called gender studies. But I really spent a lot of time working in any kind of a pocket and an internship of the crossroads of sort of now what I consider empowerment right? So anything, I worked for Planned Parenthood, I worked with women's issues, and mental health. And when I came out of school, I went to grad school, and I went to a school specific for forensics. So it was forensic psychology specifically. And there I got to like do pretty rad things. I worked with the FBI behavioral science unit. I wrote my thesis with them and students of Quantico. Of course, there's where like people go to train there. And I studied sex crimes. So, particularly crimes against sex workers. And that just like piqued all of my interests. And simultaneously, I was working at a hospital, and I was basically the first person. If someone came into the New York City hospital, the specific one I worked in, and they were a survivor of sexual assault or domestic violence, I was the person that would greet them, right? So I would almost be their advocate. And that role was really, really important to me and very life-defining at a personal level. It was just, I think, an important role for me to have. But it sort of got me thinking about trauma, the intersection of like empowerment, issues that particularly women face and minorities face. And so I really got interested in like all of the crossover of that. And probably similar to many people's stories, I had all this passion. I wanted to do all this stuff. But I ultimately took a job that was just well paying and kind of had sort of like, that like climb the corporate ladder thing. So I actually took a job permanently as a private investigator. So the first, I'd say, decade, of my career, like my big girl career, was actually nothing to do with mental health. It was more to do with that research side of that. I had worked with the FBI and I had gotten really familiar with how to research things. And about 10 years in, I had this moment that, I tell this story quite often on podcasts and things, where I was sitting at this meeting and I was working so hard. I was always coming in early. I was always staying late. I had really poor boundaries. I was working on the weekends. I was always answering my phone. I would see my boss's name pop up in my text. My heart would start to race. And I was sitting in a meeting and listening to him saying something demeaning. And I was like, what am I doing with my life? And I have put all of this time, energy, passion into the things I really care about. And I've gone so far off course to where I'm supposed to be. And so that was really, really important for me. I rushed to my own therapist. I had an emergency meeting. That night I quit my job. It did not go well with my boss. And when I tell this story, it's always very, very important for me to highlight that I didn't have a plan, right? So I had a New York City rent, I had all the student loan debt, and I was just, for the first time ever, I think in my life, I just recognized that I had more choices than I was giving myself credit for. And I had to just trust myself that I was going to figure it out. And so quickly after that, I begged a friend to hire me at a local bar and became a happy hour bartender just so I could pay basic bills. Yeah. I'm not above waitressing, waitressed for 20 years, bartended for 20 years. And I went back to school and got an internship, which was part of what would license me to become a mental health therapist. I had to do an internship, so that's where I did my internship at Rikers Island. And I worked in solitary confinement with all male population. So if there is ever a place to get a crash course on how to approach trauma, how to deal with traumatized people, by no means am I condoning any sort of violence or criminal activity, but you don't typically end up in some place like Rikers Island unless you've endured at least some of your own trauma. And then I did that for a year, came out, worked with various agencies, and then ultimately I joke I sold out and went to private practice, but I don't say that anymore because what I have discovered in this now very vast careered and varied career is it doesn't really matter whether you're in an ER hospital, you're in a Rikers Island solitary confinement, or you're just sitting with people just trying to get through their day to day. Everyone is struggling with something. And so that's really shifted, that's my, little pitch of how I got into the mental health field. But it's just super important to me. And, I've built my career now around trying to talk to people, empower people, let them feel really good. And, it's probably just I don't know. It's fulfilling all of my dreams, so it's not all just like altruistic. But yeah, that's where I've landed.
Yeah, I mean, I like that because so my 17-year-old really wants to be
Mm,
a an educator
yeah.
or forensic psychologist or teaching forensic psychology or something along that. So we were just talking earlier today. He's going to graduate high school with an associate's in general
Mm,
education, but he
wow.
thinks he wants his degree, his bachelor's, to be in forensic psychology. And
Hmm.
so we were kind of talking about that today. But it's interesting how like I some of the passions that you talked about whenever you were young, like I see those same passions in him. So I'm gonna encourage him to just be like, look, you can go do
Yeah.
all of these things, and it can all
Hmm.
come full circle eventually. And
Yeah.
it's not always you go into one thing and you stay there forever. That's
Yeah.
not always the case.
Yeah.
Which he knows, like my family is full of that kind of person. So
Yeah.
makers and remakers.
Yeah. I love that. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's really great. So, do you have like a favorite thing about working in the mental health field, or are there any things that you're like, man, this is something that I really struggle with?
I think it's going to come out sounding cheesy, but like here we are. You know, getting to be witness to, first of all, someone's vulnerability,
Mm.
that's just like a powerful experience. I will often say to clients, like, thank you for sharing that with me. Like, thank you for trusting me
Yeah.
with giving me your secrets or pitching something that was really difficult to work through. And, that just feels like powerful, right? And I don't mean that in like some egotistical, like Aussie, like I feel powerful,
Yeah.
right? But it's just like I need that in my own life. I need people to hold space for me. I need safe people, right? So just the ability to provide that to someone is really just like a beautiful experience.
Mhm.
And then, beyond that, this is where it gets even cheesier, is getting to see people's transformations
Yeah.
is just like unbelievable, right? And I just had a client but yesterday, and with permission, they allowed me to share this. I'm actually going to write a newsletter on it. They had written me an email and they said, like, wow, title line, wow, I'm finally not faking it. And when I read the body of the email, it was like, hey, we've talked so long about like confidence building and changing your narrative around who you can be. And I always say, like, look, just practice this stuff and like fake it till you make it. Right. And they had this aha moment that, like, for the first time, it was actually connecting and resonating. And they just
I love
told me this
that.
beautiful story of, like, you know what? I got the courage to say to my partner, hey, I actually don't like when you do that. Right. And I raised my hand in college where I'm typically really shy. And it's like that's really awesome, right? To get to just bear witness to someone's believing in themselves.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Anything that's like a challenge for you, or anything you don't like about it, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, the I think the like therapists don't talk about this part very much, but it, as beautiful as that can be, it also can be exhausting, right?
Yeah.
So, on a really personal level, I have just gone through like a really, really difficult time between my husband and I. We had 5 deaths inside of six
Oh my
months, right? Of all
gosh.
people super close to us. And so, it's been sort of like almost like relentless trauma on our in our life. And so, sometimes my husband owns a bar and he does like a lot of paperwork. And I'm always like, I'm a little bit jealous that you could just go to work and just like crunch numbers, right? Like you're like ordering Bud Light, where like I have to sit there and find a way to sort of compartmentalize what I'm going through,
Hmm.
right? And show up to someone as sort of like a blank slate. And, we're human beings. So that isn't an easy skill to acquire. And I actually had a client like call me out on it recently. And they were saying something and they're like, Allison, you're not even paying attention. You look bored. And I was absolutely paying attention. But I think, I usually have like, this is a very similar demeanor on how I show up to therapy. And I think I just like didn't have the capability that day to be like, yeah, tell me more, right? I was just
Hmm.
more quiet, more introvert. I was absolutely present and listening. And, luckily I have enough rapport with that client where I said, hey, thank you for bringing that to my attention. I want to be absolutely, clear to you that of course I'm paying attention. However, I'm going through something myself. I'm a human being. It's a little more difficult for me to show up today.
Yeah.
We can happily reschedule this session or, we can kind of work through it. But, this isn't certainly not a reflection on you. It's just I'm not a robot,
Yeah.
So that can be really challenging.
Mm-hmm.
You
I mean,
know?
it's you go to therapy and the expectation client side is like,
Yeah.
I'm going to talk to the same angel that I talk to every week, and it's going to be the same as it usually is. But the reality is that it's still a human on the other side of the screen, or sitting on the couch across from you. Like, it's still a person, and their energy levels, their countenance, everything is going to change from day to day. And that expectation of like, I feel like we hold therapists up here in like what we expect from them all the time. And it's like, yeah, but there's y'all are still human.
Yeah, exactly that. And another challenge I think that comes up, and again, like I think as therapists, we try to like push this back and like not own it. I'm going to own it. The two other challenges that I see pretty often is like, one, what happens when you just want to like yell at someone and say like, get out of your own way, right? Like you can see that this, like they're constantly doing this destructive path, and like you wish that you could just tell them what to do. And, very, very boldly as a therapist, I will never tell someone what to do. That is not my job. That's not empowering at all. My job is to ask you questions so you can get to your own answers. But sometimes, we're like, oh my God, text your ex back. He's not good for you, right? And it's like just finding a way to appropriately, professionally, and, objectively let them get to that conclusion. If they're going to get there, maybe they're not ready to get there at all.
Yeah.
And then really quickly, lastly, here is also a truth about therapists. Again, we're people, and not every client is compatible for us. So luckily, I've been extremely fortunate. I think I just have a good, interview intake process. But, occasionally end up with clients that, you don't like. And that is real, right? And, again, I've had that very, very fortunately, like few and far between. I think that happens a lot. It's a lot harder of a job for someone in the mental health field when they have like agency work and they're just chronically assigned someone. But again, really have to like checking yourself, right? Like, I have to figure out how to talk to this person objectively, even if maybe I disagree with them politically, or maybe they're saying something that really is, offensive to me, and like finding a way to work through that. Like that is hard. It's hard work.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Because you can't always just tell them to go kick rocks.
No, you can't. Can't always tell them to go kick rocks. Yeah.
No. Okay, all right, a couple things from chat that I do want to get to. So White Merc says, this is not a question, but your voice in Canes reminds me so much of Drew Barrymore. I keep half expecting to look back to this screen and see her. And 488 agrees. I know, right? What a compliment.
And it's so funny, like what we're all like insecure about. Like my voice is one of my huge things where I'm like, like I hate my voice, but I love Drew Barrymore, so I'll take that as a big compliment. Thank you.
There you go. And then we do actually have a question from chat. So what is your favorite poem?
Ooh, okay. I've never actually been asked that question. It is probably not the most mature of answers, but I'm going to go there anyway. But I am a huge fan of Shel Silverstein.
Oh, yeah.
And, unfortunately, the name of the poem itself is escaping me, the direct name. But my favorite one as a child was the one where, like, the little girl doesn't want to go to school today. And she, like, names all the reasons she's sick. And at the end, she realizes that it's
Norma.
I was like,
yeah.
Hold
on. Hold on. I'm going to look that one up because Peggy Ann McKay. I cannot go to school today, said little Peggy Ann McKay. Yes, that's the one. That's the one.
I was obsessed with it as a kid. And my stepson, he's 22, but he has autism. And so he, sort of operates in the world as maybe more like equivalent to an 8-year-old. And he, independent of me, became obsessed with that poem. So it's something that when we're having bad days, we're like, all right, take out Shel Silverstein. Let's go through our favorites. There's a boa constrictor one that's really good too.
Oh, I remember. Okay, I don't remember anything about the boa constrictor one, but I can see the page that it was on. Like I can see the image that was on the page. I don't remember anything about the poem, but that's up there somewhere. Yeah, Shel Silverstein is great. Like those poems are so, and they're still so relevant. That's what gets me, is like they're still, we grew up kind of hearing about them, reading about them in school and everything. And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, but my kids still like them.
Exactly, right? Timeless. Love it.
Yeah, we'll appreciate that answer for sure. And if anyone wants to go read that, there is a link in the chat for you to go read it. I always suggest reading Shel Silverstein because it's just such good work. And it's not a super long one, so go check it out.
No, nice and easy.
Now, do you have a true crime story that fascinates you? Especially given your background, I guess. That's
right?
That could be like a no, I don't, absolutely not, or actually here's one.
Yeah, I became weirdly fascinated, and it's funny because I couldn't remember her name, and I actually Googled it for myself because I'm like, why do I remember the story and I can't remember her name? And her name is Elizabeth Bathory, and I was like, right, of course. But she was a woman in Hungary that I believe had like noble roots. But she murdered over 600 people, and actually made it into the Guinness Book of World Records for being like one of the most famous, infamous serial killers of all time. And, as rumor has it, she was like, pretty cruel, and like there was some story about her that stuck out to me when I was thinking about this question, which was like she would murder people by sticking them into tubs of like ice water. And was just like,
I don't like that.
Generally, yeah, right. And so, she had like this grim way of killing. And our morbid fascination is real, right? Like, so, and there does seem to be rumors that Dracula may or may not have been after her because there was some like blood related, like drinking virgin blood type thing.
Oh, interesting.
But yeah, I love like lady killers. I just like, you fierce ladies, don't kill people, like obviously. But,
right? Yes, we don't support murder.
No, do not support murder.
It is interesting. Just, I mean, like I've never heard of that one. The number of things that you don't hear about, and then it's like, wait, I need to know everything about that now.
Yeah.
Also, being murdered by being in essentially an ice bath sounds like the worst. I don't want that for myself.
I'm not here for it.
Anyone else, but especially myself.
No. No, and when she was, if I remember correctly, and I'm pretty sure I do, when she was, I don't know if they like found guilty because I don't think they had that kind of diplomatic justice system then, but they locked her in her castle till like I guess she died.
Oh wow!
Which I remember always thinking, like, is that such a punishment? Like, maybe because you're like locked, but you're like locked in a castle, so I don't know.
Yeah. Was she locked in a castle? Bad. I mean, like with no one else? Like, was this solitary castle confinement? Because that could be somewhat punishment. Still doubt that's really a punishment.
Yeah, and I suppose it like depends, like how big is the castle, right? All the things.
Is it a tiny castle? Is it a huge castle?
Right.
Does she have to clean the castle?
all valid questions that would definitely color whether I think this is punishment or not.
Yeah, for sure. So I wonder what, do you know why she killed all those people? Like, was there ever a reason behind?
I thought, and this is the part where I was like, maybe I'm mixing stories, so I don't want to like too definitively say this, but if I remembered it correctly, I thought it was something of the like, I'm killing people to stay eternal. And I know because I know that there in a lot of that time period, like it was, I want to say a popular belief, that seems a little extreme, but it was a belief that if you drank, other people's blood, especially that of virgins, you would maintain more youthful, slash eternal potentially, lifespan. So I thought that was her, and then I'm like, wait a minute, did I watch like too many, like, oh my god, American Horror Story TV shows, and I'm just like mixing all of my lady killers all into one big pool. Don't quote me on that, but that's what I thought.
Yeah, all right, I'm gonna have to look into that one because I haven't heard of it, and it sounds like there's a lot to look into for sure. 488 says Bathory is definitely the person who bathes in virgin blood. Okay. All right.
I feel validated. Thank you for it, whether you knew that or looked it up. Appreciate it.
Yeah. They couldn't kill another noble because that would mean then they could be killed for the crime. So as long as they didn't kill another noble person, they were just off the hook castle castle confinement, and that's
Castle
it?
confinement. That's it.
Wow.
Oh,
That was what a weird time to live in. How terrifying.
totally. Yep.
I'd be going out and getting laid like super fast. No virgins in
Amen
this
to that.
house. All right. Well, that vaguely gets us on to our topic for the for the evening. So we're going to talk about anxiety and trauma and how they relate to sex and intimacy. So
yeah,
letting go of a particular emotion is something that we hear a lot, like letting go of shame or letting go of guilt or letting go of hurt. So how do you realistically guide clients into letting go of something like shame and guilt?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And we do use the term sort of like let it go. And I think maybe therein lies a bit of problems with the language itself, because when I say something like we're going to let it go, it almost feels like, when we say like let it go, it almost just has like a diminishing, minimizing sentiment to it. And like certainly from a mental health point of view, like that's actually not a healthy way to do it. To me, when we're letting something go, it's the release of the hold it is having on you in this moment, right? So, because I'm a trauma counselor, I don't really subscribe to the sentiment, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? Because the truth is we have terrible things happen, and yes, we might build resilience around it, but I think we could learn strength at having to endure trauma. But if we've experienced trauma, or we've even just experiencing anxiety, it's ultimately something that we are going to have to figure out how to navigate, because it's happened to us, right? And we didn't have a choice in that. But we do have a choice in just how much we're letting it affect our present, right? So for instance, if someone has been like abandoned by their father, right? And now they're very, very, that's traumatic, right? Now they're very scared to connect to others. They are really distant in relationships. It's really affecting, we're no longer talking about my dad. We're talking about I can't connect to other people. And that's a detriment to yourself, right? So we want to, like, the word forgiveness always gets a little bit of a cringe, but forgiveness to me, when I'm saying like we want to forgive, that does not mean excusing the person or the thing that has happened to us at all. It's just like giving it levity. It's figuring out, what do I need? What's my unmet need? So I can work through this, so I can kind of give it back to the universe and say like, look, this happened to me. I'm allowed to have all the feelings in the world about it. I'm allowed to be mad. I'm allowed to be sad. I'm allowed to be disappointed. I'm allowed to be hurt. But I'm going to work really hard in not letting this color how I'm interacting with my present, right? And to me, that's like really trauma healing, and that's really hard, right? It's like easy for me to say, and it's just like, we can let it go and we can give it release. And it's like, sure, we can, but it takes a lot of self-compassion. It takes a lot of gentleness. It takes a lot of rebuilding safety, right? So, it isn't simply pushing it out of my brain space, right? It's like reconnecting to ourselves so that other thing isn't so imposing.
Yeah. And I like to hear you talking about, it's not, forgiveness is not, what did you say? Forgiveness is not
it's not about anybody else, excusing. Really. It's definitely not excusing.
Yeah. Because I think that's a huge part of something that, if you've been through a traumatic situation, it is hard to say like, I forgive this person, not even to their face, because that's not always what it's about, but just saying to yourself like, I'm going to forgive that person, because it does sometimes feel like it's giving them an out, right? And so have you ever had anyone really push back on that and say, look, I don't want to forgive?
And I think maybe forgive then is just the wrong language to use, right? Yeah. Like if we are really attached to the idea that forgiveness means releasing accountability from something, like we can get to the same, okay, what does feel right for you, right? Yeah. What is the word and the language that it won't feel so stifling? Right? I am going to take back the control from this person, right? Someone has sexually assaulted me, and now I feel absolutely terrified to walk down the street, right? Well, let's forgive them. Like, F that. That's too, no, right? It's like, okay, forget that language then. How can we reclaim, like, because think about how much power they're continuing to have over you if that event has shifted the entire way that you interact, right? Yeah. And again, that isn't a jump. We don't have like this thought and then it feels freeing. It's like there's so much we have to restore and reclaim, right? But ultimately, the goal is to feel safe in our own body, feel safe in our own experience, empower ourselves. Like, I just like the word reclaim. Like someone has tried to take something away from you and maybe successfully has. How do we get it back? Right. And like, to me, that's sort of what the forgiveness is. But I think forgiveness just has like, in therapy books, when we talk about healing, they will use the term forgiveness. And I think it just, doesn't always resonate. And that's okay. Don't use it then.
Yeah. Yeah. And that choice over language, I think, is really powerful too, to realize that you don't have to say it that way if that doesn't serve you. That's not how you can put it a different way. This is a great comment too. I feel like there's a difficult to explain difference between saying let it go and saying let go of it. One is like, don't try to catch the running dog. And the other is like, release the rope that's cutting into your hands. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my God, I love that. That's brilliant. Yeah. That's great. I'm going to steal that.
Steal
yeah,
away.
That's true. Absolutely, that's true. Yeah. Right. And I think let it go just has like it just sounds so minimizing, because so often, from my own experience with at least anxiety, right, it's just like, come on, let that go. And I was like, thanks, that's brilliant. Like, if I could do that easily, I wouldn't have a problem. So obviously there is more to unpack here than just that, right? It's not really that helpful.
How can someone differentiate between like, I have a normal level of anxiety, or this is a normal, I guess, level of trauma response is a weird way to put that, but at what point does it become more, I need to seek out professional help to deal with this, I'm not doing well?
I'd probably divide anxiety and trauma, because I think how that question is answered is a little different. So for anxiety, I don't know if people are going to like this answer, but I'm going to say it anyway. I don't know that there's actually a healthy dose of anxiety, right? So what there is a healthy dose of is stress, right? Like we all have stressors inside of our lives that are real situations that we're responding to. Anxiety, sort of by definition, is a threat response to a threat that is simply perceived, right? And so our brains have this like phenomenal way of processing fear, right? So it goes like way back to just like, this is evolutionary, right? If we were being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, everything would speed up, right? Like our blood pressure would go up, our heart rate goes up, our adrenaline, our cortisol, and that's actually life-saving, right? If someone's chasing you with a knife, you want all that stuff to kick in. Unfortunately, what is not, from an evolutionary standpoint, gone away is even if I just think something's scary, right? So no one's chasing me, but I'm just like, wow, I sounded like such an a-hole at that party when I told that story. It was so boring and everyone hates me now. Believe it or not, that perceived fear kicks in the same exact responses if we're actually in physical danger. So, anxiety as itself, like we're really responding to something that isn't happening, right? Versus stress, which is happening. So, with that said, I think most of us probably, especially in Western culture, do have some bouts of anxiety. So if it's like, but when is this normal cultural acceptance of just like, this is the baseline for the world in which we live, and when do I need to seek care? I would say the pervasiveness and how much it's affecting your life, right? So if we're doing sterile kind of assessments, it has to keep showing up in your life. It's affecting your relationships, it's affecting work, it's affecting your sleep patterns, might be affecting your health. So if you're seeing not just this like one-off of like, I've had a bad day, I didn't drink enough water and I got poor sleep and my boss was a jerk and I came home, my partner was, left the dishes in the sink and I'm just feeling anxious of all the stuff I have to do. And then like tomorrow you go back to running and you're like living your best life. That would not be necessarily a reason to seek counsel. But if it's showing up, certainly if you're having something like panic attacks, right? But even if you're just, panic attacks are something with like low functioning anxiety, right? Like I can't get to work because this thing is debilitating me. High functioning anxiety is more your internal monologue, right? I'm laying in bed at night and I'm just thinking, I'm such a bad mom. I can't believe that I took a Peloton class and put my kids in front of the TV. That's so terrible. And I can't believe that I didn't answer enough emails. I need to work harder. If you're having like a constant narrative of I am not enough, that actually is also anxiety. And I would say that is also a good time to speak to someone so that they can help you rebuild and like pull it out, build awareness around it and rewrite. That was a mouthful. For trauma, trauma, again, by definition, is something that is seriously impacting your life, right? So each one of us have things that happen in our life that we have to deal with, but trauma really takes a lot away from you. It can disrupt sleep, it can disrupt health, it can disrupt relationships. And I would argue kind of almost the other way, which is if you've had any trauma at all, it might be a nice time to see someone. And obviously I'm biased. I believe in therapy. I certainly believe in trauma therapy, but you can find support in other ways if that doesn't speak to you. But if you have experienced a traumatic event, whether it's, using my husband as an example, he's lost 5 relatives, close relatives in a few short span, that is certainly traumatic, right? Like you need a safe space to process that, whether that's a support group, internet friends, listening to a podcast, just find support if you are the survivor of a trauma event.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like there's, of course, some trauma, like maybe if it's a car accident or something, and you process through that in whatever way, that could also cause some different anxiety. And it really depends on how you react to it. It's very personal, how you react to whatever trauma event it was. I think there's some things, sorry, I have a cat hair on my nose and it is bothering me. So I'm just going to get that. I'm just going to get that off of there. But
like now my nose is itching.
I know. I'm like, but there are some kinds of trauma events that you just really, really need to find some support for. Yeah. And, there's no shame in that. That's just something that you got to get some help for. It's tough to go alone through that kind of thing. And sometimes it's impossible to go alone through that kind of thing and still come out like healthy on the other side of it. Of course you can do whatever you want alone. Are you going to be the healthiest, happiest version of yourself if you do that? In some cases, no.
Yeah. In some cases, no.
Yeah. So going back to the anxiety side, what are some practical strategies or coping mechanisms for, I'll say, managing everyday stress and maybe managing like the high functioning version of anxiety? Yeah. And then if there's anything that you want to tack on for anxiety that's really, really interfering with your life as well, but kind of breaking it down that way.
Yeah, so something that I don't think gets talked about enough is just the idea of like bringing awareness to what you're experiencing. So, I'll give an example. I was at a teaching, right? So I have my 4 degrees. I've done this for a while now, and I was learning how to do something called EMDR. And the teacher was like, okay, I want everybody to just put a hand on where they feel anxiety. Like, where does anxiety show up in your body? And despite my degrees, despite my tenure in mental health, it never actually occurred to me, to ask that question. And so when I dropped in and I was like, oh yeah, it's always in my neck and my shoulders, I was blown away at the different answers of the other humans in the room, right? Someone was like, oh, I get a feel in my stomach, I have to run to the bathroom. Another person's like, oh, I have a headache. And that occurred to me that our bodies, I am a huge believer in the mind-body connection. I don't have this idea that we have mental health and physical health. Our bodies are sending signals to itself constantly, right? And so there's something called top down and bottom up. And top down is I think something stressful. Oh my God, I have a presentation tomorrow. I'm going to fail it. Right? I'm going to sound like an ass. The moment that I think that, it floods my body with cortisol. Again, my heart rate starts to go up. Conversely, if I'm suddenly just making my body really tense, it starts to send messages to my brain hey, girl, things are bad. And so, what we can do in anxiety reduction, stress management is really start to become aware of how does stress and has anxiety show up in my this body that I'm encasing, and learn how to soothe our nervous system. And I just think even inside of the mental health field, we don't push this enough. And with every single client that I work with, I'm like, listen, you have to learn how to take deep breaths. And it's amazing to me, just the resistance of that, right? And it's oh my God, seriously, this is your big answer, take deep breaths. And it's yeah, actually, we need to learn how to drop into our body, feel our heart, send some breath into where we're feeling stressed, and it will actually start to calm you down, right? And then we get more clarity. Example I use with children is I'll show them a snow globe, and I'm like, okay, let's shake the snow globe. What's the picture? And it's I don't know. It's okay, let's let all the snow settle. What's the picture now? And the reason I use that as an example is the calmer we are, the more clarity we get. Right? So it's just, I think like if we can't get to, we have all this noise in our brain, whether it's I'm overwhelmed, I'm exhausted, I have too many things on my plate, I have this high functioning anxiety that's always telling me I need to do more, I'm not enough. In order to quiet that buzz, we have to kind of start somewhere. And like, it's a tactical way to start to just like release,
Yeah.
so that we can get to the more emotional, like the deeper processing.
I really like the snow globe example, and I'm going to use that. I'm definitely going to use that with my 10-year-old because we had a recent incident, and I had to sit him down after this incident that I was not home for. I had to sit him down afterwards and be like, okay, next time this happens, because I'm sure it's going to happen again, you got to take a beat. Like you got to wait a second. So he was home with my dad. I was going to pick up my older kid from school because he wasn't driving yet. And my dad was home, but he had gone to the bathroom. And my 10-year-old had the dogs inside, and he thought my dad had left. And so he opened the front door to go out and see if my dad's truck was still there, which it was because he was just in the bathroom. And the dog got out. And so and he ran after the dog down the street. My neighbor saw him, helped him get the dog back, but like he was barefoot, running on the street. He was crying like almost inconsolably. And the neighbor was just like, I am so glad that I saw him because who knows how far he would have gone. And so the next time it happened, which it did happen just the other day, he let the dog out. And after we had talked about it, I was like, look, first thing you got to do is you got to put your shoes on. Like the dog is going to get, first of all, that dog in particular, we have 3 dogs. That dog in particular would have just come back to the house if my child had not chased after him. It's just how he is. And so I was like, look, take a second, put your shoes on, evaluate what's happening because you're not seeing clearly. Like you're in a panic. And if you don't stop the panic first, you cannot solve the problem. And so I think that snow globe example would really help. And for the record, the next time it happened, he did stop and he put on his shoes. And before he even had his shoes back on, the dog had come back inside on his own.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't being chased. That's just, that particular dog is still a puppy and wants to be chased. It's just how he is.
Yeah.
But
it's a great example though. It really is. And something that I often say to clients and myself, it's like a huge mantra that I give to myself is like our anxiety not only lies, right? It's like the dog is going to die. You need to get outside immediately, right? It like it totally makes a catastrophe out of things. But beyond that, it makes everything feel urgent, right? So like once that anxiety kicks in, you're just like, I need to go now. And it's actually quite rare that you actually do need to go that exact moment, right? Almost all of us, with rare circumstance, have time to pause. We just don't. No one's taught us how to do that yet, right? It's a beautiful lesson for your son, right?
Look, he's only 10. He's still skill building.
Exactly.
I used I explained to him all kinds of situations that pausing would help in. So the snow globe's going to help me explain it a little more eloquently, maybe, than I had before.
Love it.
But yeah, I mean, I think experiencing a level of stress in your day and just being able to, even if it's not rising to the level of being anxiety, if you're still able to get yourself into that calm space, it's going to help you make better decisions and at least make you not feel as stressed, maybe.
Exactly, right? There's never going to be a negative side effect to learning how to take that beat, right? Like it will always be a good skill to have in pretty much everything we do, whether it's like someone cut me off in traffic and I just need to like chill and like, you know what, me flipping them off actually isn't going to solve this problem and actually make me feel like crap, so maybe it's not even worth it, right? Our boss says something crappy, right? We want to be able to take that pause because, I try to encourage clients like, listen, we all have reactions, right? But it is better to respond than react, right? Reaction is like that knee-jerk, visceral thing that just like comes out of our mouth. And the more intention that we can put around choosing a response, right? The less regret we have, the better we'll communicate, the better we feel about what we've just done.
Yeah.
And that usually requires just like a hot minute of pause, right?
Yeah.
Like, let me collect my thoughts before I'm just responding or reacting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So shifting to talk about trauma a little bit, can you talk about any specific self-care practices or things that could be beneficial for folks who are dealing with the kind of reactions to trauma or are in the wake of a trauma?
Yeah. So, I'll say this till I'm blue in the face. I think, one of the biggest effects that trauma has on us is just shaking our sense of safety, right? So any way that we can bring that back. And like, I'll give you a random example, but I joined a pole dancing studio, right? And it's for women only, and they like lock the doors and shut the curtains, and like the ladies just like drop their clothes, right? And move our bodies. And the owner of the studio was talking a lot about how, especially in the wake of trauma, that not everybody in the studio has trauma, right? But she's just speaking, just in case you do, right? Is like re-embodying your body, right? And just learning how to move it without feeling judged, without feeling, unsafe. And just, it sounds so silly that like something like moving your body on a pole inside of a community of women can help trauma, but it actually can. And it doesn't have to look like that, right? Of course not. It's just thinking about yourself, your personal self. What reconnects you to who you are fundamentally. So like for me, I love to swim, right? Putting myself in a pool, a bath, a lake, that all helps me connect back to myself. Surrounding yourself with people who feel safe, right? Becoming really intentional about who you're sharing with, or even just if you're not even ready to share, like I don't want to talk about anything that's happened, just sharing space with people who fundamentally have your back, right? Building community. And that can look like, I'm not a religious person, but churches work really well. Religious groups, spiritual groups work really well, right? It doesn't matter. You can join a cooking class. You can join a book group. You can join an online community. It's like, these are the things that actually don't really feel like they're trauma healing, but they are, right? Connecting back to yourself, feeling safe, feeling connections that feel safe, right? If we can fundamentally find a way to get back to that, we do start to disempower the thing or the person that has hurt us. And that's really, really important.
I like that you talk about it could be anything. It doesn't have to be this one particular thing. A lot of people, have religious trauma, and that's so if church is not for you, then it's not for you.
It's not for me. But
if you're someone, I mean, it's also not for me. I grew up that way, but it's not for me now for various reasons. But churches have a lot of really good community building. And I think if you can find an organization, whether it's connecting over a specific, like you were talking about a book club, or if it's about a specific game, like a D&D group or something like that.
Seriously.
Yes.
I absolutely see D&D help human beings, again, restore not only that connection, but just it's something that sparks joy inside of them, that fulfillment, right? It's like, so just listen to yourself. Like, what is the thing that makes you smile, right? And like, try to build community around that. Try to make space for that. You're gonna see progress.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about kind of the connections between anxiety and trauma, and also issues related to sex and intimacy?
Yeah. So, I think sex and intimacy is a place that anxiety and trauma either concurrently or separately show up quite a lot, right? So, you just mentioned religious trauma. I'll go to trauma and then anxiety, right? So trauma, we can, I think like the most overt trauma is like, I have endured a sexual trauma, right? I've been the survivor of a sexual assault or a rape, and now I'm having a really difficult time connecting to sex and intimacy. And of course, that is going to have a cause effect. But beyond that, right? Like someone who grew up in a really religious community where sex was shamed, or sexual exploration was shamed, or masturbation was shamed, or, you have to be really modest. That can, shift someone's experience, often does, shift someone's experience for how they can show up sexually. And especially if you've rejected that messaging, right? So I've had so many clients that are like, listen, I grew up in this like super religious upbringing where like shame was just, sex was just like off the table. It was a dirty thing. You shouldn't do it. And I don't believe that, right? Like, I don't believe that. I've rejected that. And yet, despite the logical rejection, it's like that still comes into your mind, right? Because we're really impressionable, especially when we're young, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you've had a lot of that messaging, even if you've rejected it, it might be really difficult to show up and really take up space inside of the bedroom. And, I think that's really, really important to talk about and to name, right? My husband grew up in a super, I'm like, will he care if I say this? No, he won't. He grew up in a really religious upbringing, and he was just like, the idea of like, it was so sinful that he's like, into my 20s, I would have sex with girls, right? And then I would have like this deep, deep shame spiral that had a fallout. Like, it almost wasn't even pleasurable because I was like, am I going to go to hell? No, I don't believe that. But, right, so that kind of trauma certainly can show up. And then with anxiety, we have anxiety about all sorts of things, right? Like, we don't learn how to communicate to our partners well, right? So often, and I do sex therapy on the side and as one of my specialties. And even if someone isn't coming specifically for sex therapy, something that I hear so often is like, you know what, I really hate when my partner does XYZ, but I don't know how to tell them that. Right? They're going to feel rejected. I don't want to hurt their feelings. Right? We don't learn how to communicate effectively, whether it's telling someone I don't like that, or even scarier to tell someone I want to try something. Right? Mm-hmm. And I'm talking about, it doesn't matter if it's a new partner, a one-night stand, or your long-term partner. We just don't have a lot of skills built around communication. We can have body shame. We can have body anxiety. We can have performance anxiety, right? So all of these mental health things, like, sex is a quick fire way to be easily triggered, right? It's one of the most vulnerable things we do. We are literally effing naked, right? And we are sharing, touching, space, intimacy, connection with someone. So it just inherently puts us in a really vulnerable space that invites in those triggers, right? And so, that doesn't mean we're all doomed. It just means there's work to be done, right? Identifying your own triggers and just building skills. Communication is skills, right? Confidence is a skill. Exploration is not really quite a skill, but it's an offshoot of a confidence skill. So you can rebuild all of this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of connections.
Yeah.
And I do think that it is one of the one of the times you're the most vulnerable. I think is a really good point to bring up, because a lot of people don't take that into consideration. Like, they don't consider you are naked. That is when your body and your mind are like, the shit could happen to me right now.
Yeah.
So that can bring up a lot in general. Mm-hmm. You talked about communication. So what are some effective ways to communicate with a partner, either about their anxiety or about their past trauma or about things that they want to talk about when it comes to sex?
Yeah, obviously honesty, right? And that's like really hard for us. I always like to encourage clients to, before you're ready to share it, right? Because good, effective communication is not only what you have to say, it's can they hear it? So think about what you want to say raw, right? Like, I just want to say, oh my God, stop touching me that way. I want to say, hey, I want to have a threesome, right? Fine, whatever, in the sexual context. Then we're going to find a way to pitch it, right? And it might have to involve much more validation. Hey, boo, I really want to share something with you. This is really vulnerable for me to share. I'm worried that it might hurt your feelings, but because I trust our partnership so much, I'm going to trust you that I'm allowed to say what I'm about to say, right? So, we call that the shared problem. It's kind of like owning the elephant in the room. Like, hey, whatever it is I'm about to say, I hate it when you leave the dirty dishes in there, or I want to explore other people in the bedroom. It's like bringing attention to that. I know that this is a vulnerable conversation. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's like 1 point. 2 is remembering that you're on the same team, right? And even if like I have a couples therapist that I used to see who was always saying like, look, the pitcher and the catcher have totally different vantage points, but they're on the same team, right? And that's how couples are. So sometimes when you can at least just remind yourself that, right? Like, I am talking to this person because I'm improving my relationship, because I have the right to say what I need, because if I say what I need, I won't get to resentment. It will ultimately help my partnership. That can help also just like give us a little bit of confidence fuel. And then the most basic communication skill is using I sentences. The most prescribed formula is I feel, insert feeling, when you, their behavior, and what I need is blank. Right? And the reason that we do it that way is research tells us if you and I don't even know each other, we're total strangers, but I'm like, listen, you did this. The moment that I say you, someone gets defensive, whether it's true or not. Just that word cues defenses. So the more you can shift the attention to how I feel rather than what you're doing, right? It can actually like very, very, very much help, communication. I didn't invent this wheel. It's been very vastly proven.
Yeah.
So,
and it's kind of the sandwich, like they tell you whenever you're giving review feedback, you're sandwiching it with positive, negative, positive. So in this case, it's the I, you, I.
Yeah, exactly that.
kind of pattern to just say like, this is what's happening and this is how it makes me feel. And then ending with, here's what I need. And I'm interested to know, like, is there ever a time where you should just be super blunt, super upfront about something instead of spending the time to like really pitch something or couch it that way?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. So I mean, I think it depends on the couples, right? So I am actually a person, like, your partner, right?
Yeah.
So I am actually a person that doesn't need all of that like song and the dance in the front. I would be like, get to the point. What do you need? What do you need? Right? That's my communication style, right? Like that's how I receive. My husband's the other way. I have to like sandwich it, make it pretty, put it in a bow, like before, so his defenses don't go up. And so I think, ultimately, again, communication is not about what you say. It's also about how can they receive it. And I think thinking about the person individually, how does this person, in the history that I've had with them, whether it's short-term or long-term, when I've said something to them, what's been the most well-received, right? Do they need me to hold their hands? Do they need me to directly look at them? Are they better if I text them because they can't handle in-person conversations? Like, what is the best setup for this particular conversation?
We just talked about this, not in the context of sex and intimacy, but in the context of work. So I'm joining a new team at work, and we all went to dinner, and we were talking about our different personalities because I'm new to the team. So I'm upsetting the team dynamics, not in a bad way, just in this is a new person, we got to adjust. And so we were talking about all of our different personalities and stuff. And I'm one of the very few people who wants things direct. Like, I don't want you to give me extra stuff. If I'm doing something poorly, I need you to tell me right away. Like, don't save it up. Like, just shoot me a note or call me. Also, I prefer not to have a huge lead up like, hey, we need to talk. Can I schedule some time? Like, no, just tell me what it's about. Just call
Totally.
me. And so there were a lot of people on my new team, and also a lot of people that I've worked with in the past, who really want that extra validation, and they want you're still good, everything's still good, here's what we need to work on, everything's still good, we're gonna get through it kind of thing. And so knowing who you're working with, especially if it's someone new, if it's a new partner or something like that, is really important, no matter the context.
Absolutely. And you make such a great point in so much as like, hey, if you don't have the answer, right? Maybe you don't have the longevity of like saying like, oh, shit, I don't know what they like. Ask them, right?
Yeah.
When I got hired, I worked at the same bar. My husband owns it. That's why I met him. It's a dangerous story where I started sleeping with the owner and subsequently married him. But one of the manager who hired me, when he had us fill out a sheet beforehand, like before on our training, and it literally said like, how do you like to be communicated with, right? Like, do you like email? Do you like text? Do you want me to call you? And then do you prefer direct contact? Do you need a little more coaxing? And I remember thinking it was crazy at the time because I was like 19. I was like, what is this? And I've thought a lot about it since in the 20 plus years. And I'm like, actually, if we could just like hand little tickets out to everyone, like just tell me, give me the Cliff Notes version. Like,
Yeah.
what do you need when I have to talk to you and say something difficult? How do you want me to pitch this to you?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And something I don't do couples counseling anymore because it's very hard and I don't like it. But I would often hear, it's like, okay, well, what do they like? Tell him what you like. And it's like, he should know. And it's like, well, he doesn't,
Yeah.
And I think we do that so quickly, right? Whether it's our boss, our partners, whatever. It's like, actually, it breeds, everybody wins when we are having the conversation of how to directly, individually talk to each other, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that card. Like that. So you said that was a while ago, right? Like that.
Yeah, it was like 20 years ago.
That's like
he's a man ahead of his time.
Yeah. Because that's great. I mean, that's something that I would, if 17-year-old came back, he doesn't have a job, but if he was looking for a job and he came back with something like that from PetSmart or whatever, that wouldn't surprise me, I don't think.
Yeah.
But when I went to work at Outback Steakhouse, if I got a card like that, like at that time, I would have been like, the fuck is this?
Exactly. Yes, it was lost at me at the time, but now I appreciate it. I've thought a lot about that card.
It's crazy the things you can look back on and be like, oh, actually, I hated that then. I get it now.
Yep.
If someone has been through trauma, especially a sexual trauma, what advice do you have for couples who are navigating those intimacy issues, either right after that trauma or if the trauma has lingered on for a while?
I'm just going to keep saying this to you. I'm like, great question. What I would say to that is, it's okay to go slow and it's okay that trauma changes things. Yeah. So, the idea that if you've endured something really traumatic and your sex life is going to, especially in the immediate aftermath, but honestly, even it lingers, right? If you need to rebuild, if you need to go slow, if you need to revert back, all of that is okay. I often work with clients where, one or sometimes even both of the partners have endured some sort of a sexual trauma. And we'll talk about like, look, we so often think of sex and like what sex and intimacy is, like immediate thought process goes to like penetrative sex, but you can have all different types of sex, even and intimacy. Oh my God, your cat is so cute. I can't.
He won't leave me alone.
Yeah, I love it.
Cat, but he just won't leave me alone sometimes.
Mama.
I know.
Even if you just go back to like, let's hold hands, right? We're going to undress and just lay next to each other. Like you can go and rebuild as slowly as you need to go. And there is no shame in that game, right? It just means, again, rebuilding that safety. And that can take time, right? Something has been taken from you. So, you can restore it, you will restore it, but like gentleness, compassion, communication, that gets you so much more power, more healing than just like, this is supposed to look this certain way. Why am I screwing this up now? This shouldn't be that way, right? It's like, well, it is. Something happened and that has shifted my sexual experience that now I have to address and figure out how to overcome.
Yeah.
So go slow. It's all right.
The idea of starting completely over with just like, let's hold hands, like let's take it really super slow and let's just hold hands. Like that's so, you don't hear people talk a lot about that in the wake of a sexual trauma, especially of sometimes you need to just take it all the way back. Just take it all the way back and work it a little bit slowly. And I feel like if more people understood that, it would be a lot easier in that aftermath, because it takes so much patience on both partners' parts also.
Absolutely.
But it's really important. So
important, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If there's anybody out there who currently is listening and they're having some struggles with anxiety or trauma or sex and intimacy, what would you say to them right now?
You're going to be okay, and you can reconnect, you can restore, and, you may not feel okay today, and it may come in waves. Right. So, even someone who is the most healed, whether it's from anxiety or the most extreme trauma, it is part of your story, and you're going to have good days and you're going to have bad days. And if the bad days come, if you're noticing that you're feeling triggered again, if, you know, I have clients will say something like, I was doing so good. Why is this still happening to me? And it's like, that's because you've endured something difficult. And it shows back up sometimes. And so, you know, again, learning not to shame yourself, not to judge yourself. It's just like, okay, this is what it feels to have a bad day today. This is what it feels like to be re-experiencing my trauma. You know, we need so much self-compassion and love. We do not need criticism, shame, and judgment. Right. And so often we feel something and then we judge our feelings. So, you know, if you are enduring, you know, trauma, anxiety, any of the above that we've talked about, or even just, you know, mental health issues, depression, know that there is healing available, know there's support available, know that you can get through, like, you are made to do tough things. I don't wish trauma on anyone, but sometimes we do experience, even though we don't deserve it. But there is another side if you are just kind, patient with yourself, compassionate with yourself, and, you know, find support on those tough days, because there is support out there in all sorts of forms.
Yeah. Yeah. It can be really hard to like see that in the midst of it, but
absolutely,
there are better days. There are better days ahead. And you just gotta kind of trust that sometimes. There are plenty of days where I've been like, I don't believe that.
Same. And I preach this.
Yeah.
You know, we will all have that experience. We'll all have really tough things to go through, right? So, you know, but what we do, people are resilient and we do get to the other side. We just need that patience, compassion, and support.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any specific resources or tools that you love related to these topics, or that you would recommend to either individuals or couples who are trying to find out more?
Yeah, you know, something that I like, just like the beginner's guide too. I'm a huge believer in mindfulness, especially in context of dealing with anxiety, learning how to re-embody yourself. And what I mean by mindfulness, I think often that gets sort of mistaken for like meditation. Mindfulness is simply the ability to have awareness to what's happening to you, what you're feeling, without judgment. And, you know, the beautiful part about like the mindfulness movement is there is no shortage of resources out in the interwebs, right? So like legitimately, I don't even need to give you like my top 3. If you just Google like mindfulness 101, you're going to come up with apps like Insight Timer. You're going to come up with Instagram accounts that talk about deep breathing. You're just going to find so many resources. And I think, you know, the reason I don't have like, hey, here's my top is because everyone's a little bit different. Right. So, you know, you're going to quickly see the ones that resonate to you. But I always start with mindfulness, right? Like it is, so there's such good resources. Even like when we were talking about like restoring my body connection, there's something called like it's basically like a body projection. Oh my God, why am I losing words right now? Progressive relaxation. There we go. That's what I'm trying to say. And it will basically ask you to almost like tighten up different parts of your body and then learn to release it. And there is like probably thousands at this point. You can get them on YouTube, you can get them on Apple Music, you can get them on Spotify. That's like a beautiful way of learning how to release tension, right? And so like that's one that really speaks to me. If it doesn't speak to you, find something that does.
I think also that progressive relaxation piece, the part that I love about that is that sometimes you're holding shit in your body that you do not notice until they're like, tighten all the muscles in your feet. And you're like, oh shit, they're already tight. Why are they already tight? And then you relax them. And it's just like it just goes like head to toe. And you'd be amazed how many times you get to a certain part of your body and it's like, okay, tighten this. And it's like, oh, my left shoulder blade already tight. Okay, now relax it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
But yeah, there's, I mean, thousands of different YouTube videos, no matter what. We were talking before about, you know, not being on Spotify and stuff, but Spotify, YouTube, wherever you, probably TikTok. I have no idea.
I'm sure.
It's just everywhere.
Everywhere.
But it's really incredible, just the things that you don't realize your body is already holding on to. And that kind of goes back to what you were talking about earlier, is just your body and your mind are so interconnected that if you can get your body to say like, shut the fuck down, your mind is also going to go, okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Which is great. Man, I haven't done one of those progressive relaxation things in a while. I need to do one again. All right, I'll
I
have to
know. I'm
do
like,
one. I'll
have
have to
I
do
done
one.
one? No,
I
that's why
know.
I couldn't say the words.
It's
So
been
that's a
a
good reminder
while.
for do it
Yeah,
tonight.
yeah. It's
Committing to it,
good.
I am.
And it doesn't have to be when you're ready to go to sleep either. Like I've done
Mm,
them in the middle of the day if I'm having a really super
totally.
like super stressful day or something at work. I'll take a beat and just over my lunch that I don't always
Yeah.
take. I'll take at least 5-10 minutes and do one of these. And it doesn't take very long, but
Yeah.
and do one of those. And it helps you shake up the snow globe and then let it settle.
And then let it settle. That's so true. It does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are great resources.
Thanks.
Now, at the very beginning, when I was talking about all the
Yeah.
wonderful things you've done, you talked about having seen over 25 countries, which is impressive,
Yeah.
and I love it, and it's wonderful. Has that global perspective and that experience influenced your understanding of mental health at all?
Oh my God, yeah. It's funny. I I only started traveling in the last since I met my husband. So we've been together for now almost 13 years. So it wasn't until my 30s that I traveled at all. I mean, like, I had gone to Mexico, I had gone to the Caribbean, things like that. And we just randomly like took a Groupon to Costa Rica back, and it was like the middle of rainy season because that's why I got a Groupon. And I didn't know how to travel savvy yet. And it just ignited my passion for seeing how other humans live their lives. And, I just think very strongly that the more that you can witness other people, the more open minded you become. And, I am, lucky enough that I can access travel. I prioritize it. I live in a smaller house. I don't buy designer things. All of my budget goes to traveling. That's super important to me. But, not everybody may get the gift of traveling, but you can do that through books. You can do that through stories. You can do that for connecting with other people on the internet. Like, just try to widen your worldview because it's just eye-opening. And in the context of mental health specifically, I was fortunate enough, I did a 6-week sort of like internship volunteer shift in Sri Lanka, which is like a little country sort of like outside of India. And I specifically worked with the National Institute of Mental Health there. And it was, amazing to see, like, sometimes have a harsh view of our Western culture. I'm like, we don't talk about mental health enough. And just having that, like, I went and I worked under one of the psychiatrists in Sri Lanka, and it's like it's a small country. It's populated enough, and there was there's like 5 in the entire country,
Oh, wow.
and I like sat with this psychiatrist, and like people had like walked days to just get to sit with him and like be prescribed things and like talk about their feelings. And, if that doesn't shape how you come back home and be like, all right, as much as I'm like, we need to make mental health more accessible, right? It's like, all right, there is actually people who have it even harder than we do. So it's certainly shaped my view on the mental health system, but just people in general, right? Like we're all kind of just trying to do the best we can fundamentally as human beings on this world.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
no matter where you are
no matter where you
and what you
are.
have available. Yeah, I shit
Yeah.
on the healthcare systems in
Yeah.
this
It's
country a
bad.
lot,
Yeah.
but
Valid.
I know that there are other countries where they are worse. I fully very well know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Doesn't mean we can't do
And
better.
exactly that. Exactly what I was going to say. It doesn't mean that we can't hold space for both and be like,
Yeah.
wow, okay, we do have some privileges. And also, like, America, get your shit together.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know?
for real. Please, please. Uh,
Exactly.
so on a little bit of a lighter note, what is your favorite
Hmm.
life hack?
Ooh, it's so funny when you asked that. I was like, shit, what is my favorite life hack? Um, you know, and I don't know. I want to come up with a cooler one than that, not with a mental health tone, but here we are. I'm going to do it anyway.
Go for it.
It's my life hack is like really start to pay attention to what you're saying to yourself. So with my clients, I tell them, I like absolutely force them to do this. For 45 days, every single time you brush your teeth, I want you to look in the mirror and I want you to say one nice thing to yourself. I don't even care if you're lying to yourself just yet. We want to build that habit of starting to say kind things to yourself. So that, and that are birthed from the like, oh my God, I'm not faking it anymore. Right. So It is a practical tool that every single person on this planet has access to. You can do it yourself. No one has to know you're doing it. It's something internal for you. I swear to you, 4 degrees, hundreds, if not thousands of clients later, this shit works. It just does. And beyond that, like, get pets. It's like I was like, what's the best thing that I've ever done in my life? And I was like, adopt my dog. So if you're a pet person, surround yourself a little, like, look at this kitty, right? Like, animals are awesome. Surround yourself with like animals in nature. That's also my life hack.
I agree with both of those. I mean, listen, I've got a cat, I've got dogs, we've got a turtle, we've got snakes. We're animal people here, so it's great. But yeah, I mean, so what you're talking about with the brushing your teeth and saying something nice to yourself while you're looking yourself in the mirror, that goes right back. We just had a conversation last week with Jeremy Nagel on habit stacking. And that kind of goes straight back to, like, stack that on top of brushing your teeth. You're already brushing your teeth. You're already probably looking at yourself in the mirror. Just say something nice to yourself. Like, add it to your already established habit. And
beautiful.
See what happens in 45 days.
Yeah.
See how you feel.
Exactly.
If you don't want to do it after 45 days, then don't do it after 45 days. Quit. But maybe you'll keep going.
I've never one single time in all of the time I've been doing this have someone come back to me and say, who actually did it. People bow out soon and then just give up before they've started. But I have yet to have anyone come back and say, like, that, usually say that felt uncomfortable at first, but oh my God, it's so annoying, but it worked. Right. And it's like, I know it does. Just do it. Just trust me. Just take a leap on me. Like, take a leap of faith on me. Just do it.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely. Oh, I love this comment. Bite Mark says, other people have it worse isn't a reason everyone shouldn't have it. Isn't a reason everyone shouldn't have it better. Yes. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And, thank you for saying that. Something that I often say is, like, if you're like, oh my God, Allison, I'm so hungry. And I'm like, you know what? I haven't eaten all day. That does not take your hunger away, right? Like, that comparison to other people and, like, ordering who has it worse, like, it really ultimately isn't helpful for anyone. Like, you are valid in whatever you are feeling and you deserve to feel better, period. Doesn't matter.
I was just talking about this at a family thing also. I was talking about a book in particular that I left a very poor review on Goodreads for, but one of the main characters said to another main character, like, oh, but did this happen to you? Then don't talk to me until that happens to you. And I literally put my Kindle down and went, to my Kindle.
Good.
Like, no. Bad.
Yes, exactly. You're right.
But yeah,
wrong messaging.
The writing in that series got real bad. So I'm on to a different series now. But yeah, it's just like, you can experience something negative and I can experience something negative. And even if it was the same exact thing, it could have been worse for you than it was for me. Or it could have been worse for me than it was for you. Like, we're all humans. We're all individuals.
Yeah.
We all handle shit differently.
Absolutely. We all have our own perspectives, our own triggers, our own traumas, our own big T traumas, our own little T traumas, our own anxieties. Like, it's just, again, I'll say it again. We're all trying to do the best we can with the cards that we got dealt. And we all got dealt different cards.
Absolutely. Well, we are getting to the end of the stream. So if anyone has any other questions for Allison, make sure to pop them into the chat and we'll address them. But Allison, if you could wave a magic wand and eliminate one common opinion or misconception or theory surrounding disabilities, mental illness, or talking about mental health, what would it be?
Ooh. I'm going to say, because it's been at the top of my mind, and I may have even said it already, but confidence is not earned, it is learned. And I think that the misconception is that we have to do things to earn our worth. And the magic wand is if everybody just ditched that narrative completely and was like, you know what, I just inherently can show up and take up space. I deserve my spot in this world. The world would be a fundamentally different space to live in. So, every single person who I will talk to who is listening today, you have earned your worth. You don't need any prerequisite for it. It is a bullshit misconception that is saved for the powerful or the successful. You deserve it.
Yep, absolutely. I agree with that. Show up, take up space.
Yeah.
You can do it. You deserve it.
Do it scared. Yeah, all the stuff.
Do it scared. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
If confidence is earned, can it also be burned? I mean, yeah.
Ooh.
Speaking from
Yes.
experience, yes.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a good point, and I think back to the point of sort of like, listen, the world takes things away from us, right? Like that is just a truth, but we can have the power to restore it, right? No one should have so much power over us but they have destroyed us. And that happens. We can feel devastated, we can feel betrayed, but fundamentally, no matter what someone does to you, you still deserve the right to be loved. You are worthy, you are capable. So yeah, confidence can take a hit for sure, but it's remembering that, that's why I say it's learned, right? It's a skill that we have to practice. It's not just something that like poof comes. So you can repractice it, right?
Yeah.
And believe that you can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good comment, Growling. Thank you.
Good comment. Good comment. Yeah.
Well, Bite Mark says, I just want to say thank you so much for being here. This was a great discussion.
Thank
I learned
you.
and had fun, and that's pretty much the best combo. That's true.
We did it.
That's what you want.
Yeah. Thanks for being here.
Well, is there anything else that you want to cover or talk about that we didn't get to, or anything you're working on, or I'll just give the floor to you for a minute?
Yeah, working on. So, if you want to find out more about the work that I do, I am at www.anotefromyourtherapist. You have all my social media handles. I do all sorts of things, right? I provide therapy in the state of New Jersey. I provide therapy intensives in the state of New Jersey for people who are looking for some like more rapid fire VIP, like quick healing. I am doing a free workshop on confidence and how to reset your mind, totally free, on April 3rd. My link is usually showing up. It's certainly on my website, shows up on my Instagram stories. And I'm actually doing my first group coaching program, which is it starts on, oh my God, May 1st. And I have a few discount codes for anybody who listens to where I show up on podcasts. We can definitely use like MommaFoxFire. If you chuck it in there, you'll get all the dollar bills off. But yeah, I do a bunch of things and a whole suite of levels and accessibility. So, check it out. I love community.
Yeah.
I love connecting with people, So yeah.
Awesome. I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah.
You got a lot of shit going on.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and I have a podcast. It's weird thing for me to say. I have a podcast called Becoming Unstoppable. So it's on, the Spotify, the Apple, all that stuff. And we talk a lot about this, about mental health, about empowerment, how to feel good in your body, overcoming shame inside of sex, all the stuff.
Absolutely.
All the stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Becoming Unstoppable. Let's see. I've got becomingunstoppable.org. Is that the right one?
Probably not. No.
Probably not. Oh, okay. Not that one. Not that one. All right. Hold on. Here it is. I got it on Apple. Here, I'll post the Apple link. There we go.
On the Apple. I was like, I don't think so. Maybe am I on .org? No. What do I know? It's only my podcast.
Listen, I couldn't get even tacosfallapart.org or .com. It's tacosfallapart.com. So shit happens. It's fine.
I love Even Tacos Fall Apart. It's brilliant.
Thank you. And Bite Mark says also, I love the art behind you, just as an aside.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's I'm gonna have to point out the artist really quickly, but it's called Sister Golden, and it's really rad. She collects all this stuff out in the nature, and she only does prints. And then she returns all the stuff back to nature. And so I just thought she was really cool. I have them all over my house.
Okay, well, I got that website. We're gonna do a little link there for anyone who's interested in that art. That's awesome.
Yeah, she's cool.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time tonight. This has been super fun. And chat, give me just a minute to disconnect with Allison. I will be right back. Stick around.
Thank you so much.
Let's see if the camera's gonna work. Oh, it did work! Yay! All right, good. I'm glad. Sometimes that camera just does not want to work, and it happens. Well, I thought that was a wonderful conversation. Thank you guys for sticking around for another Mental Health Wednesday this time. We don't usually do a lot of these on Wednesdays, but Allison had to reschedule before, and then I had to reschedule, and I was like, you know what? No, because I'm scheduling future guests like way into the future, and so I didn't want to make her wait that long. So I'm glad we were able to make it happen for tonight. That is excellent. And yeah, we're gonna play. Let's see. What do we want to play today? What do we want to play today? I'm not feeling MMOE today. So let's see. What does that narrow it down to? We could play some... You know what? We talked about religion a lot tonight. Perhaps we should continue my religious conquest in Civilization. Because we still haven't. It was a really enjoyable talk. One of the top ones for me. I'm so glad. Yeah, it was a good one. I'm glad that, you know, it's nice to be able to talk about topics that aren't like always discussed openly, because they're the ones that are, I feel like, the most important to have, because people don't necessarily talk about sexual trauma very much, and they don't talk about what to do in the aftermath of that. So yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought it was great, and she was wonderful. Braid game on point, yo. Aw, yeah. It's actually a little fuzzy, but that's okay. Spread the good news of MommaFoxFire to the whole world. That's right. Modern Poet, hi! Hi! Thank you so much for that raid. How are you doing today? Welcome, welcome. Let's get a shout out for Modern Poet. I think your hair might be longer than mine. My hair is pretty long right now, actually. Not quite long enough for me to donate, but this is just like an over-the-shoulder braid. I did the other day, I haven't done this in a really long time, but I did 2 braids just to sleep in because I didn't want one at the back of my head. Sometimes that's a little uncomfortable. But yeah, it was interesting. Like, my hair is super thin, so having 2 thin little braids, it was really fun for a minute. You matter. Oh, Modern Poet, you matter. Thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate you. We just wrapped up Mental Health Wednesday. We were talking about anxiety, trauma, and sex and intimacy. It was a really great conversation, and we're gonna move into some civilization now. So we're gonna do a little bit of that. How was Fortnite? I know you usually have to go walk your dog right after your stream, so if you need to go, don't feel obligated to stay. It's all good. But yeah, welcome everyone who is here from Modern Poet Stream. I'm MommaFoxFire, and I am random. That's it. That's all you get. I am random. It's true. Okay, let me change my... Oh, you know what? We'll say goodbye to YouTube for just a moment. And I will do... I'll redo the YouTube video with a new title and then come back on YouTube. Because... YouTube doesn't do this one particular thing as well as Twitch, and that is switching topics. So let me stop the